I recently had the privilege of having a chat with Carol from Astrotourism WA, who agreed to have a chat about light pollution. Carol's been involved with the night sky and light pollution for, I think, possibly a few decades now, and she'll probably say, "I'm not that old, Michael." So it's been great to have a chat with her and her mission to improve awareness about light pollution. Now I'll have to apologise for the quality of the audio of the video. It was excruciatingly windy on that day, and I'd recently gotten some new equipment, and unfortunately I only had one fluffy on the microphones, so therefore there's been an awful lot of post-processing and noise reduction on my microphone, which you might hear the wind blowing every now and then. Thanks, Carol, for coming to talk to me about light pollution. Can you tell me, for starters, what is light pollution?
Well, normally our nighttime would be illuminated by natural objects like our moon and the stars. Light pollution is anything human-made that illuminates our night sky. And that can be, and that's especially for things like overlighting areas or using the wrong type of colour temperature LED light, which emits a higher blue light into the dark time environment. Colour temperature is the measurement that's used for the new technology in our LED lights. The higher the colour temperature, which is measured in degrees Kelvin, the more blue rich the light is. The lower that colour temperature is, or the lower the degrees Kelvin, that's a warmer coloured with less blue light in that colour spectrum of the light.
How can we tell if it's light pollution or not?
You can certainly see light pollution really easily. If you're out in the country, you'll notice some white domes of light on the horizon. When it's nice and dark, you'll notice these white domes of light, and that's light pollution emanating from a country town. There's street lights there, or perhaps it's from a mine site way off in the distance. But you can tell if it's light pollution by asking yourself a few simple questions. Is the light that you're seeing necessary? Is the light that you see useful? Is it being used correctly? When you're in a city, there's a lot of light pollution because there are a lot of lights that are emanating that, there are a lot of lights that are emitting that light into the nighttime environment.
And what's the effect of light pollution?
There's some really big effects that light pollution has. First of all, it hides the night sky. When we shine light up into the darkness, the more light that we shine up there, the less we can see the stars. But it also affects things like wildlife. So turtles hatching on a beach, when they hatch, they are drawn to the lightness or the bright surface, usually of the ocean, with the moonlight reflecting off it. But if there's a brightly lit town just on the shoreline there, the turtles will be attracted to that brighter light, and so will hatch and move towards that brighter light rather than the ocean where they should be going. It also affects migratory birds. So birds can get confused by light at night, and it can stop them getting to their breeding grounds, so stopping that cycle of life and reproduction for birds. There's mass insect deaths around the world as well. Insects are attracted to the blue light, that blue light, and and perish underneath those lights.
I think we've all gone to, like, we're having a light out in the middle of the night, and all these light bugs are going everywhere. You go, stay away, which is, which is one of those things you go, yeah. You can see them physically attracted to the light that way. I think I saw a report somewhere saying that there was something like 70% of life of wildlife is actually affected in some way by light pollution.
Yeah. In fact, nocturnal animals, they see the blue, like the colder or cooler colour temperature lights much more visibly than we do. Our human eye doesn't really see it as bright as, say, kangaroos or possums at night. They really, really get affected by light at night. But it also affects our human health. So it affects the sleeping and waking cycle of our bodies. It interrupts the melatonin production and so makes it harder to fall asleep at night. So, for instance, that's why they say you shouldn't be looking at your mobile phones or your tablets just before you go to sleep, because that interrupts that sleeping and waking cycle and leads to less quality sleep for us. The other thing that I see that light pollution really affects is the cultural heritage of our night sky. So when the light hides the view of the stars, you can't see them as well. So you can't see the Aboriginal astronomy constellations as well. So it stops you from hearing those stories, and I see that as a big interruption to that cultural value of our night sky.
Now, if I'm, now, I'm going to go completely off track in terms of the questions I actually said, so I might come back to that later. But if I'm, say, someone who just lives in Perth, I say, well, I can't see any of the stars anyway at the moment. I can basically see maybe a dozen or so from the middle of the city. I'm not really, Renee might kill me for this or something like this. I'm not interested in say, the night sky for cultural purposes. So the question is, who cares? I mean, is it that much of an issue?
Light pollution is a global issue. It really is. It's increasing by at least 10% every year as our cities get bigger and we change to LED street lights. It's such a big environmental asset. It's like a big forest or the ocean. It's one of those assets that you should see at least once in your life, and repeat visits are, it's such a huge asset that we're forgetting about. Because of light pollution, it's getting hidden. And I think the night sky is something that we should all be looking at a lot more often by travelling out into the regional areas and seeing it. It can move people to tears. It has an overwhelmingly positive effect on your soul and even mental health, I think, too. When you look up into the night sky as it's supposed to be seen and it's truly truly meant to be seen, you feel your place in the universe. You can feel that you live on a tiny little rock called Earth that orbits a tiny little star called our sun that is just one of millions and billions of stars in our one galaxy, the Milky Way. And our Milky Way galaxy is one of trillions in our universe. So losing sight of the stars makes us forget our place in the universe. And I think it's a really important connection that we should be striving to protect.
I guess another thing, possibly, depending on how you look at it as well, is that, I suppose, how long have we been studying light pollution for?
Ooh, not very long, actually. Well, light was only created earlier in the 19th century. No, 20th century?
I mean, in terms of artificial lights.
Artificial. Oh, yes, okay, yeah.
In terms of the light pollution.
Yeah. So we've only been realising the problem about light pollution just in the last few decades as light has increased and as it's increasing more. The International Dark Sky International, which is our worldwide foremost organisation that is studying light pollution and striving to protect our nighttime environment from light pollution, they only began in the late 1980s. So it hasn't been a very long time that we've been looking into the issue. It's only been during these last few decades where it's been increasing overwhelmingly that it's suddenly been raised as an issue and something that we should avoid into the future.
I guess if you draw back to the effects on wildlife and also flora as well, is that in the scheme of things, if we've only been studying it for so long and it's actually having potential extinction risks with these items as well, is that, hey, look, it's not really that reversible. Is that once it's actually happened, it's like, oh, look, now we've had all these things happen in just such a short period of time.
Yeah. I guess over the last few decades, we have been noticing the effects on animals. So the effects on insects, the effects on birds and turtle hatchlings as well, animals like that. So that really has alerted us to the problem that light poses for our environment and those animals within the environment.
Okay. What causes light pollution and why is it growing so much?
Light pollution is caused when we overlight something. So it's when we haven't shielded the light to point down rather than up into the night sky. When we choose the colder or cooler colour temperature LEDs to light an area, that causes light pollution. And it is something that's growing, it's been estimated at about 10% every year. And it's just as our cities get bigger. So where people are, light pollution is, because of course we do need light at night. We just need the right amount of light at night and it pointed in the right direction and using the right colour temperature of light. But as our cities get bigger, we're putting in more lights and that footprint of light is accumulating and causing that problem. Also with the change to the LED technology, because they are a more efficient use of energy, so they're actually cheaper to run, which is wonderful, but the tendency around the world has been to light more or use more light because it is in fact cheaper to run. So there's the problem, and we're seeing this huge increase in light pollution.
What can we do as a society then to help control light pollution?
Light pollution is actually an easy pollution to get rid of. It's very reversible. We've created the problem, but there are a few things that we can all do to help reduce it. Simply by shielding light and pointing the light down on the ground where it's actually needed is a really great way to start reducing light pollution. The other thing we can do is choose the right type of light. So LEDs, LED street lights and LED lights in our houses and in industrial sites, if we choose a warmer coloured or that more yellower, orangier colour of LED light, that'll be much better for the nighttime environment too. In fact, LEDs are wonderful because we can make them smart as well. So we can put the technology in the light so that we can dim it when it's not being used and we can turn them off again. I don't know whether you remember, but street lights used to be turned off at midnight or 1 a.m. once upon a time in Western Australia. And I know that I have a few towns that I'm working with that are really keen for that to happen again. And so by simply having that smart technology within the street light, or in fact any light, we'll be able to dim them or turn them off when we want to.
So who needs to make that change?
For our street lights in Western Australia, the change needs to come from government and from our power companies. We're working hard to make sure that they're starting to understand the use of light and the management of light at night so that we can all work towards getting a better street light for Western Australian towns, even in the city of Perth and our regional towns in the years to come.
So if I'm say as a normal member of the public, I'd say, hey, look, someone's smarter than I, and these companies have all got analysts and so on who do all the maps and so on. It's like, yeah, this is the best way to go. Well, I mean, what can we do as a general sort of public?
Yeah, so just as a single person and in your own house, there's lots of things you can do. Once again, choose that right colour temperature of any outdoor lighting that you might have. Make sure your outdoor porch light is pointing down, and perhaps when you're not needing it, turn it off. You'll save energy and you'll start reducing light pollution as well. And because it's a cumulative thing, like the more lights we use, the more we turn on, the more we turn off or use less of, the less cumulative it'll become, and we'll have an overall impact on light pollution.
This will also can say, talk to your local member of parliament or your local government as well, because it's local government. It's not just state or federal. I mean, it's talking to the power companies directly. It's actually saying, talk to someone who can actually prompt these changes, like as you're saying, it's the government sorts of policies and so on.
Absolutely. Even at the local government level, there are staff working in the environmental area, and they're becoming quite knowledgeable about this now. So talking with those staff members of your local council, really fantastic idea to increase that awareness and, and put your hand up to say that, you do want a protected dark night sky environment for the future.
So thinking with the other hat on then from, say, a regulator's point of view or a government's point of view, they're going, I'm so exhausted at the moment, I've got too much on my plate. You see, if we went around changing these lights, we have to go through our compliance checks to make sure they do whatever we want them to do. Is it going to cost any more? Or, I'm just going to do things the way it's always been done. Is that the situation? Or is it,
I think because we're all aiming for our net zero targets, changing our lights is one easy step we can take to reduce our carbon emissions. By using the right LED light, we'll use less energy, and by reducing the amount of that light that we use, we'll use less energy. So I think there's good...
Well, in the scheme of things, some of them might arguably be doing a little bit of lip service as well, because they go, I'm just too busy. We're making lots of money. So for some companies' point of view, the general idea with a lot of companies is that the directors and so on are appointed for the purposes of of the company's purpose, which might be increasing wealth or something, making as much money, making as much profit, because all their benefits are all around, their motivators all around how much money they make for the end shareholders and so on. I think that's actually come up with a lot of companies recently, like your larger supermarkets as an example, where you go, well, we're actually rewarding them to make money. Are we actually, as a society, placing them on the wrong sort of benchmarks to do? But the thing is that I guess it's always been done this way, even when I was doing my degrees and so on, even say 30 years ago, they were talking about ethical or social impact sorts of standards as how we should be doing things. But that doesn't really seem to have taken off for a lot of entities.
I think as we go forward, more and more companies do have their social and environmental bottom lines. And I think that there's more and more who are striving to fit better in the social and environmental world. This is something they don't have to think about too greatly. Reducing light pollution, there's a few easy steps to take, and I don't think it's very onerous.
To go for another sort of quick question, I think you actually were talking to me before about this as well, is that lights, when they go up, they're there for a long period of time because it's more cost effective to put them up and get it right when you're changing them over, as opposed to, now we've got to change them all over now, because that's where all the cost comes from, is doing all the rework, basically.
It is really quite simple to make those decisions in the design phase of a project, whether it be industrial or you're building a house or you're making a nice park or something along those lines. If it's a new project, it doesn't cost you anything more to put in those right lights. In fact, you'll be saving energy and saving money in the long run, and giving yourself a tick as well, that you have thought about the nighttime environment and the animals and the humans that inhabit that area and how you can help benefit their lives. I think that whole problem of wasting energy is only going to get more and more critical. Management of light can really help save energy. So as we go forward to net zero targets, fighting climate change, I think light pollution is going to be a big topic and will be one of those big ways that we can reduce and save energy in the future.
In terms of all the studies that have been done, is it all peer reviewed or anything? Is there any studies that say that it's not a problem?
No, I haven't heard of any studies that have said it's not a problem. There are lots of studies on animals at night. There's lots of study on the energy waste that light pollution is creating. There's not so many studies on safety. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence that light at night, depending how it's used, is not necessarily safe. We do tend to equate light with safety, but bright white light at night can create really dark shadows at the same time. So, for instance, I've heard a story of teenagers in Melbourne who, when they catch the buses at night, stand outside of the bus shelters. The bus shelters are really brightly lit, so when you're standing in that shelter, you can't see anything else around you. So they stand outside of that shelter so that they're aware of their environment and they can see, what's happening around them. There's another great a story that I've heard from in Melbourne with an old disused warehouse that was having some problems with graffiti. Like, it was being graffitied all the time. It was brightly lit at night. It was all illuminated, an old warehouse. So they decided to turn the lights off and the graffiti stopped. So, I don't know, having light around at night is important, but as long as we're lighting just what we need with the right amount of light and in the right colour temperature, I think we'll be doing ourselves a great service. As you start to research light pollution and understand a little more, there are different components of it. One being glare, which is that overwhelming sensation you get when you're looking at lights and that uncomfortable factor. There's sky glow, so that light that we're pointing up into the night sky, and that's called sky glow. There's light trespass, so that's unwanted light coming into your house or your bedroom at night. That light that it's being used out on the street, but it's trespassing into your private domain. And there's light clutter as well. So when there are so many lights all together, cluttered up, can be really confusing when you're out and about at night. So those components of light pollution are important to understand, because as we use light, we can use it correctly so that we don't create those components or don't create those problems. There's some really great statistical analysis of what's happening in the world. Light pollution is increasing by about 10% every year. And this is meaning that there is 80% of the world's population that live under some sort of light pollution in their night. In fact, 1/3 of the people on this planet now cannot see the Milky Way anymore. And there are some children who will grow up never seeing a star. If you can imagine living in a place like Beijing or New York or London, Tokyo, any of those big cities, and you're not travelling into the darkness to see the night sky, you'll grow up not even seeing one single star.
I think we take a lot of it for granted a lot of the time, because basically we go, even in Perth we can see an amount of stars, or it doesn't take us long to get out somewhere, because we're accustomed to it. Whereas if you actually, as you said, my nephew came to Perth not long ago, and he looked up and he was absolutely fascinated by the stars, even in light polluted suburbia. So therefore they just can't see anything where they are.
It's really, it's very sad to see that happen. Really sad to see that happen. I love what you just said though about taking it for granted. With the work that I've been doing, when I first went out into regional WA to talk to the local governments about light pollution and about creating a dark sky tourism sector for the state, they all sort of looked at me a bit strangely. And because I said to them, do you realise you have a world-class asset above your heads every night? And they sort of went, really? Really? And, people, I said, will pay lots of money to come and experience this beautiful asset that you've got. And it's simply because it's dark. We're very lucky in Western Australia. Well, Perth is the most isolated capital city on a continent in the world. And that means that most of our light pollution is in Perth, and we just have these beautiful, large area of darkness. In fact, I think Western Australia might have the largest land mass of darkness on the planet. Certainly our oceans don't have light on them, but I think when it comes to land mass, I think Western Australia has quite a substantial amount. So it took some awareness raising and convincing, but soon the communities that I was talking to could see this is something special and this is something that's disappearing around the world, and it's something that we can invite people here to experience.
I'm going to do 2 items of devil's advocate here. No, questions without notice. We, as a tourism industry, seem to be very obsessed on the idea of an event. So you have to have something significant. You've got to have your power, a particular sort of event that basically comes along, and then all of a sudden everyone goes, yay, in terms of an event. But of course, the night sky is not like that. It's there except for sometimes when it's cloudy or something like that. Is that an issue with the tourism side? I mean, because ultimately, why are they so focused on the event side of things?
We do have a big focus on events, and it's a bit like a total solar eclipse. It's an event that casts this great spotlight on a place, and events do that. They create that big spotlight, but we should be looking towards building the legacy, long term. The night sky, like you say, it's always there. It's always changing. It is an event in itself. Every night above our heads, there's always something of interest happening up there. But it's about making sure we leverage those events to create the legacy, so that we have visitors coming back to enjoy that asset that was used for that event.
I think my take about events is actually a little bit like the that metaphor, analogy, talking about, teach a person how to fish, about if you give a person a fish, you'll feed them for a day or something like that. If you teach them how to fish, they'll keep, you'll feed them for a lifetime, because they'll just keep on doing, providing they don't overfish, I guess. But in the scheme of things, like an event is like saying, look, we're going to feed you now, and then we're pumping all this money into it, as opposed to if you create an environment where people just keep on maintaining that flow and just keep doing something without having to keep throwing things at it and say, look, it's an event. Second item as a devil's advocate is that this has actually been happening all over the world recently. And there was also reported by the ABC on places like Denmark and so on, is that they're putting up these signs saying, no tourists, because what's actually happening is a lot of people are either coming in and they're using up all the resources, or they're basically coming in and they're not actually spending anything. They're not actually contributing to local economies. I was talking to a good friend of mine recently down south, and she was just saying, every now and then you've got your school holidays or whatever, and you've got this mass of people who clean out all the supermarkets all the time. And while I was thinking, well, shouldn't they have anticipated for all this, these things and have the infrastructure in place? But the problem is that if no one's spending money, if people are just going, oh, I'm just going to lounge around and make a mess, I mean, the tourists are actually also getting a negative sort of connotation to them at times as well.
Like touristing, it has been happening around the world and here at home as well. WA has such a big night sky. Like, there's hundreds of beautiful, small, welcoming country towns out there. I can't see over touristing becoming a problem for the night sky tourism or for dark sky tourism. I think that there's enough space, so to speak, out there that we can spread visitors around. It's just about making sure that we can create the experiences that people can have under the night sky, like, dinners under the sky, under the stars, or wildlife spotting at night, going to an observatory, having just even a picnic, lie back on your picnic rug and looking up at the Milky Way. So I don't think it can become over touristed here, because we've got so much of it and it's spread right over our state.
Then hopefully try to encourage people to actually see what else is there, and also to spend some more money to actually help the local economies and so on.
And that is hard to try and entice visitors to different locations. A lot of visitors go back to the same tried and tested place. But if we can, then it really creates a great economy because it's nighttime tourism, so it's dark, and if you're a visitor, you're not likely to travel any further at night if you're already in a place. So that means that that visitor's staying in that town or in that location overnight. And as soon as that happens, there might be dinner at the pub or breakfast the next morning, filling up with fuel, visiting the local news agency, maybe even discovering another attraction that's nearby that they can do. So it actually keeps that visitor in the area longer, which is great for the local economy.
I think the issue we always have is how do you bring other people along on the journey with you? Because in the scheme, and it's actually open to debate, well, by the way, we're still recording, it's open to debate basically to say, hey, look, we're also still open to talking about, because there's different ways to achieving the same thing. We're all on the same page in that we want society to still flourish and survive. We don't want to have a mass extinction event, for example. But the thing is that sometimes you go, there's, I suppose, trying to make sure they can at least see our points of view properly and actually understand these issues, not necessarily just say, oh, no, just I suppose a lot of climate skeptics and so on as well.
It's making people think about something in a different way. It's a bit like, I think that WA can brand itself on the back of our beautiful environment, and that includes the night sky, of course, but also, we have some of the oldest rocks on the planet. We have amazing wildlife. We're a biodiversity hotspot, so there's a lot of our environmental assets are really great attractants when it comes to tourism. It's about finding your niche and finding what's different about your location to promote, to attract visitors. And, I think about the City of Perth's City of Light promotion, which is currently playing out. I shouldn't roll my eyes. When I think about the City of Light, when I think about the City of Perth, City of Light promotion, I think that there are other cities around the world that are better at the City of Light, like Paris, for instance, is known as the City of Light.
In the scheme of things, we're only the City of Light because there's so much dark around us. Because that's why it was a patch for the astronauts to see in the first place, because there was a lot of places that was dark enough so that therefore the contrast was there.
Astronauts were coming across the Indian Ocean and hitting the coastline of Western Australia. So they wanted that beacon to see when they passed overhead. I think that we can reinvent ourselves though as the City of Starlight or something along those lines, which is a shout out to the world that we have these world-class dark skies and this beautiful darkness that is disappearing around the world. Come here for that. Come here to experience, there's not many places left in the world where you can stand completely alone in the dark, surrounded by an incredible ancient landscape. And that really talks to your soul and is something that, you just can't find just anywhere anymore.
And we're relatively safe as well.
Yeah, often you are safer standing out in the middle of nowhere in the complete dark than you are in the middle of the world's brightest cities.
I want to thank Carol for the interview and the knowledge about light pollution and helping me on my journey of understanding more about light pollution as well. There's a lot of resources which are available about light pollution. You've got Astrotourism WA, you've also got the International Dark Sky Alliance, and even the government's site about light pollution as well. I hope this video was of interest to you and looking forward to catching up with you on the next video.